Also ich begrüße Sie ganz herzlich hier im Namen der Firma Beyer und es freut mich, dass Sie so zahlreich erschienen sind und Ihre Interessen bekunden für den Vortrag von Skoulatos. Ich möchte Ihnen ganz kurz vorstellen, so eine kleine Einführung. Und ja, Skoulatos, er ist in Griechenland geboren und aufgewachsen. Er hat sich schon in seiner Kindheit sehr, hat er mir gesagt, so für Wissenschaften, Mathematik und auch für Geometrie interessiert. Er hat dann Physik studiert in Liverpool, da hat er auch seinen Doktor gemacht. Und sein Werdegang hat ihn dann so nach Deutschland geführt. Und zuerst hat er im Helmholtz-Zentrum in Berlin gearbeitet, ist dann zum Paul-Scherrer-Institut in die Schweiz und schlussendlich ist er in München an der Technischen Universität gelandet und arbeitet dort als wissenschaftlicher Forscher. Er hat natürlich, wie man das so hier sieht, ein sehr intensives Hobby. Seine jüngste Faszination für antike Mechanismen, die widerspiegelt sich wirklich in seinem Hobby. Also Hobby sage ich so ein bisschen in Anführungsschlusszeichen, weil es ist schon fast eine Passion. Und mit dieser Passion, also deshalb steht er hier, und er berichtet über den Antikythera-Mechanismus. Er hat diesen auch nachgebaut. Der ist ja 100 Jahre vor Christus, ist er zurückdatiert, der Originalmechanismus. Und er hat eine Replika erstellt. Er hatte dafür 2 Jahre seine Freizeit geopfert, weil er hat auch noch Familie und Kinder. Und das eine Stück steht bereits im Museum. Und er möchte aber anschließend an seinen Vortrag, wird er seinen Mechanismus vorstellen und Ihnen demonstrieren. Ja, und jetzt gebe ich das Wort gerne weiter an Skoulatos und ich wünsche Ihnen viel Vergnügen mit dem Vortrag.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Beyer and Monica Winkler, the director of the museum, for the invitation to present this talk. It's about the Antikythera mechanism, and it's a double pleasure for me. First, because this is my hobby project, and secondly, because this is a tribute to my home country, Greece, where the mechanism originates from. So it's a scientific instrument, the Antikythera mechanism, which is mostly shrouded in mystery. And this is exactly the purpose of this talk, to try and remove some of the mystery and of the enigma around this device. So this is the overview of the talk. I will first take you to the Greek island of Antikythera, where the shipwreck was discovered 100 years ago. And I think it is important, in order to estimate the complexity of the device, to have a look at the historical research on the mechanism, because this has been studied for almost 100 years until it gives us its full secrets until now. So then I will directly go into the mechanism, what it is, its internal and external architecture, the operating principles, and so on. However, the mechanical part alone is not enough to understand the device, so we need to know a little bit about astronomy and a little bit about maths, in order to see how people managed to devise epicyclic and differential gearings 2,000 years before. And finally, I will make an attempt to conclude all of that. So, in 1900, Greek sponge divers set off from the island of Symi on their way to the African coast to collect sponges, and they had to make this stop here due to bad weather at the island of Antikythera. And the next day, when they dived into it, they found this huge shipwreck. So this is the site again, and this little red dot is where the Antikythera shipwreck was found, and this is an early picture at the time when they started these discoveries to retrieve the artifacts. So basically there were 2 important thunderstorms set 2,000 years apart. One was essentially sinking the ship down, and the other one is when these people found it and they essentially brought it to the surface, this team of people. And this was so a random discovery, and I would like to make basically an analogy here with the discovery of the X-rays, which was also a random discovery and happened around the same time. And as we will see, it was a key ingredient in order to solve the mystery, because it was used throughout to understand understand the interior structure, but also with using X-rays. We will see this later. So the ship itself was colossal in size. It's also been termed the Titanic of antiquity. And here we see a wooden part and some nails from the main body. So it contained numerous artifacts, which were enough to fill an entire museum, namely the National Archaeological Museum of Athens. Here we see some sculptures. And here you see, for example, the area here was corroded. This was exposed to the salty seawater, and this part here was embedded into the seabed, so it was protected. They found nice jewelry, beautiful glassware here, pottery, and so on. These are some of them. Very nice piece of art. And amongst the recovered items was a small rusty chunk of metal about this size. This is the Antikythera mechanism. And this is the main fragment of it. It broke apart into many pieces. And if you look at these pieces, you will notice two main things. One is you have precision gear wheels, so the teeth of the gears are between 1 and 2 millimeters in size. And also you have engraved inscriptions all over it, which are also the same size, about 1 millimeter or 2. So if you look at it, you may think maybe it's a compass, or maybe it's a protractor. And these inscriptions may serve as the user manual for that. But let's see more in detail. So I've divided the studies on the Antikythera mechanism into 4 phases. The first phase was from the discovery, 1900 until 1940. And there were many individuals who had a go at looking at that and trying to find out what it is. I would like to mainly mention Wren, because he got so many things right with having so little clues available. He had an amazing insight. And Theophanidis, who is the first guy who tried to make a reconstruction without knowing almost anything about it. So it was quite a brave attempt in the 30s. So the people thought at the time maybe it's a clockwork mechanism inside some wooden square compass, or maybe it's a sun clock or an astrolabe, or perhaps even a ship component. And the closest they got to it was when they thought it's maybe an orrery or a planetarium. What is commonly accepted, though, was that it's a unique finding of huge importance, nothing like that had been found before, and that there was a kind of a user manual for this, which was these inscriptions. And I have this sign here to show you that there were so many correct ideas and wrong ideas mixed together, and that's why it was so difficult at the end to distill the information and see what is the correct things about it. And that lasted 100 years. So the reputation of the device started to spread out, and the research continued on that, and we reached the second phase in the 50s, with the main guy being Price, with the help of Karakalos and Stamiris, where they deduced it's an astronomical calculator, and they also deduced the basic architecture of the mechanism. They saw 30 gears using X-rays, and they also guessed that there must have been the Metonic cycle, which is the 19-year cycle. We'll talk about this a bit later. However, there were many open questions, and then we reached the third phase, mainly with Wright and Bromley in the 80s up to 2000. They made very, very detailed observations. They found a pin and a slot mechanism, which we'll talk about later. They saw something that was responsible to show the moon phases, and they actually identified the Metonic calendar, which was inferred from the previous cycle of research. And they also thought perhaps there is an eclipse predictor on this as well. And we reached the fourth phase, which started in 2005, which actually solved the enigma. Here we see a huge device. It's an 8-ton machine. It's an X-ray tomographer entering the museum in Athens. So the device itself, the Antikythera mechanism, is not allowed to exit. It's very fragile, and it's a unique item. So they decided to bring this huge piece inside the museum. And they actually made it especially for this research. It was built for that. And basically, it was an interdisciplinary team of physicists, mathematicians, astronomers, archaeologists, historians of science, epigraphists, etc. And they all were put together, and they used mainly two techniques. One is this 3D tomography I showed before with X-rays, and the other one is this called RTI photographs. They take pictures of the device with many different lighting conditions, and then with a computer, they can enhance the picture and they can read very well the text on it. With the tomography, they could go to a resolution of about 0.1 of a millimeter, and they could even see internal inscriptions in there, which was not expected before that. And this led to a complete understanding, or more or less complete understanding of the mechanism until at least the parts we have now. Equally importantly, this led to a worldwide community of interest around the device. So this is an X-ray picture of the Antikythera mechanism. The main fragment, you can see many gears together here. The actual size is very small, it's about this when you visit the museum. And here is a video about that, where you can see X-ray cuts through the Antikythera mechanism. These nice graphics were prepared by Tony Fried from the Antikythera mechanism research project, and you can see all of the gears, the pins, the arbors, the supporting plates, whatever you have in there, until you reach the other side of it. So this is, you cannot see all of this by eye, you only see the two faces. This is the inferior structure, and basically it's a unique thing. It's a true wonder of antiquity. And it actually made us rethink completely about the history of science and technology, and that had to be rewritten in the light of these results. We wouldn't expect such things to exist. This is my replica.
Oh.
So, what is the Antikythera mechanism? I will directly give a quick answer. So, basically, it's an astronomical calculator of ingenious design and unprecedented accuracy. And what it does is it predicts movements of celestial bodies. It gives you star positions, it gives you solar and lunar eclipses, and also it has some social character because it gives you also Olympiads and other pan-Hellenic events. In other words, it's an ambitious construction that encapsulates the cosmos, the universe, as people knew it at the time, and made it through time. So the architecture of that, basically it's a gear device. You have a side input here, you turn this knob, and this sets in motion all of the gears together. And it gives you future predictions about astronomical phenomena. You have two displays. Here you see the front display, at the back you have another one with different dials and different information. And you have an engraved instruction manual with stuff written all over. So these are now both the front and the back sides together. And you see there are many dials. I've highlighted them here. It tells you about the moon age, this Egyptian solar calendar, the zodiac here, stars, Metonic cycle. This is the eclipse prediction cycle, and there are other small subsidiary dials as well, giving more information. We'll talk about a couple of them later. This is the internal architecture. So if you look from the side, you see something like that. And this is the front side up here. This is the bottom side, the back side. And basically you have three supporting plates. 1, 2, 3, which are holding 20 axes together, and these are themselves holding 40 gears. Each one of them are gears, and here's the input. And I've color coded it, so if you follow the red gears, for example, you go towards here, and yes. So in the quest of trying to look for ancient gears, I came across something very interesting, which I would like to share with you here. So I found the most ancient gear. If you take this insect, which is called Issus, at its back legs here, it has this geared structure, which helps it accelerate to an enormous rate of 5 up to 700 G acceleration. It's really, really impressive. And in order to achieve that, it needs to synchronize very, very well. So it needs these gears, and you have these teeth, which are 20 microns in size. Anyway, but what can we do as humans with gears? So the first thing we all know about is power transmission in our bikes or in our cars or in some small toy, etc. So the other thing is before the invention of the electronic calculators in the 70s, people were using for about 300 years, they were using these mechanical calculators to do mathematics. and calculate stuff. So this is another thing you can do. If you set the gears into regular motion with constant speeds, then you can also do periodic phenomena, for example in a clock. Or you can make yourself a planetarium, like this very nice planetarium. It's made by Dondi a few hundred years ago. It's really an amazing piece of work, and there are very, very few pieces available, and one of them is actually here on display in this museum. So you can also do this, which are periodic phenomena. And another thing you can do is you can do some precision handling if you have some high ratio, for example, when you tune your guitar. And in practice, you have a combination of some of these for any application. And in the case of the Antikythera mechanism, we have this one, mathematics, and this one, periodic phenomena, put together into the device. Perhaps this is the most important slide in the sense that if you can follow that, then you understand 90% of the mechanism. And it's actually very straightforward to follow. So if you have two gears with 38 and 64 teeth, what this gives you is, it gives you a division. You get 38 divided by 64, or in other words, if you divide by 2, it gives you 19 divided by 32. So this situation here, you can also model like that. This is equivalent. However, you cannot simplify it anymore, because this gear has 19 teeth, which is a prime number. It can only be divided by itself and unity. And so this gives us a consequence that if we have prime numbers, they have to stay like that. And this is why on the actual Antikythera mechanism, we find a gear with 127 teeth, it's a prime number, or 223 teeth. And these are actual gears on the mechanism, or 53 and 57 are also there. So it was very, very accurate, perfectly mathematically constructed, this device. And this is the actual proof of the gears. This is a 53 tooth, 127 and 223. Okay. In retrospect, I think one would have two main problems to make the mechanism, especially the original one. One of them is mathematics and astronomy. Is basically how to combine all of these periodic events together that are seemingly incommensurate with each other. For example, you have the day, you have the month, you have the sun, and they don't fit, these periods don't fit in each other in integer numbers, or the eclipses, for example. I will talk about this in the next slide as well. So that's one problem he had to face. And the other problem was a technological one. So how to fit the cosmos or the universe in a box, basically. So the picture I had in my mind for the time when the mechanism was made was something like that. So somebody holding a piece of metal and somebody hammering on it until it gets the right shape. However, this is very far away from the techniques used to make the Antikythera mechanism. So obviously they had these fine mechanics available there, and they could work to very fine details to produce these very small gears and axes. They obviously had lathes and other machines. Okay. So back to the first problem I mentioned, which is these periodic movements. So we have, for example, the day, which is the rotation of the Earth around itself, and that's obviously related to the sun. You have the day and the night. You have the month, which is the moon rotation around the Earth, and this takes about 27 days. And you have a year, which is 365 days. If you divide these two together, you get something like 13.4. It's not an integer. So that's the problem. You have some incommensurate quantities. So this leads us to take two calendars. One is a solar calendar and the other is a lunar calendar. The solar calendar is the one we have now with the 365 days. And the lunar calendar, we don't use it because the seasons are shifting every year, if you follow that. So that's not very practical for us. However, it was used, for example, in other civilizations like the Egyptians, which they didn't care so much about the seasons because the weather was flat, but they cared more about the Nile flooding and so on. So the lunar calendar was much more important for them. Okay, so let's now familiarize a little bit with the night sky. Here we see the moon, and we also see three planets, Venus, Mercury, and Mars. Venus and Mercury are around the constellation of Taurus, and Mars is in between Leo and Cancer. And I'm not sure, there is a line here, probably you don't see it. This line here is the ecliptic. It's the apparent path of the Sun, and this is where all of the planets lie. And this is where the 12 constellations are, or the zodiac, Taurus, Leo, Cancer, Virgo, and so on. And the reason why this is all in a line is because our solar system is a flat disk. All of the planets around the Sun are on a flat disk. So this gives you this ecliptic. And the rest are the stars. Okay, so all of the planets are on this. Now let's talk a little bit about the Moon. The Moon has a very complex motion. I would like to go into it a little bit. It's important to understand the Antikythera mechanism. But before that, I want to make a small parenthesis. So nowadays, when we look at the night sky, this is maybe the only object we identify and we know what it is the Moon. But the situation was not like that in ancient times. People were much more aware of the night sky. It was a kind of the internet for them, in the sense, not in the modern sense, but in the sense that they were much more aware of it, and they spent a lot of time using the night sky, and they used it to organize their activities, etc. And the other important thing to know is that there were hundreds or thousands of years of observation of the night sky from great civilizations like Egyptians or Babylonians. However, it was the Greeks which turned this into science. Going from observation to science is a huge step, and this is important to make such a scientific device like an Antikythera mechanism. It's a scientific instrument. You need to make this jump. So, the first cycle of the Moon, which I want to talk about, is the lunar or synodic month, and it's going from the full moon back to the full moon again. So it's 29.5 days. Simply like that. The next cycle is, if you see the Moon in front of some star, and then you wait until the Moon goes around its orbit, back to the same star again, then that's the sidereal month, and this is about 27 days. Now, the path of the Moon is slightly elliptical. I'm exaggerating it here. And we have the apogee, which is the point where it moves the slowest, and the perigee, where it moves the fastest. So if you take the period to go from the apogee to the next apogee, to the next time it reaches the apogee, you would naively think this is the sidereal month I introduced before. However, this line here, it's called the line of Apsides, is actually rotating itself at a very slow rate. So by the time you reach this position, this line has moved by, I think, something like 5 hours. So you need a little bit longer to go from the apogee to the apogee. So you need 27.5 days as opposed to 27.3. And this is not now known that it's because of the solar tide. And these durations actually were known, and they are coded into the Antikythera mechanism. All of them, 2,000 years ago. And the last period I wanted to talk about is something that is important for the eclipses. So we have this ecliptic trajectory I introduced before, which is where all of the planets lie. This is our solar system. And the Moon actually makes a small angle to that, 5 degrees off. And so to get an eclipse, you need the three objects, the Moon, the Sun, and the Earth, to be co-aligned, or roughly co-aligned. And in order for this to happen, you need to be here. Otherwise, they're not in the same line, they're not in the same plane. And you have these two nodes. This is the side view, this is the top view. So you have the descending and the ascending node. And the time it takes for the Moon to go around from an ascending node to the ascending node again is called the Draconic month. And this is 27.2 days. It's a bit shorter than the other ones. So this was also calculated and known and calculated. And this is a time lapse of a lunar eclipse, how it looks like from the Earth. Okay, now I've probably said a lot of information together. I'm trying to summarize this in one slide. So the first problem we discussed about is the year and the lunar months, which are incommensurate with each other. And the second problem is all of these lunar months. You don't have to remember them, but you know, some of them are responsible for the trajectory or the stars or the eclipses and so on. what is important to notice is they are all different to each other. So, how do we solve that? So the solution for both of them comes actually by using integer numbers. So basically, Meton of Athens took 19 years, which are 235 lunar months or 254 sidereal months. So basically he made a larger cycle. And this was the 5th century before Christ. And basically, we don't know about this cycle, but in fact we do use it because the Easter we're having every year, which you have to always calculate, it goes by this Metonic cycle actually. So we, in fact, we have it in our society, but we don't really know it. And the other cycle is the Saros cycle. This was already known by the Babylonians, even before that. And if you take 223 lunar months, this is equal to 239 anomalistic months or 242 draconic months. So again, you take a larger duration. This is about 18 years. And this is important for the eclipses. Here we see how you get a solar eclipse, and here how you get a lunar eclipse. The moon goes into the shadow of the Earth here, for example. And these two cycles, the Metonic and the Saros cycle, are at the back side of the Antikythera mechanism. So that's exactly what you see at the back display. So they're color-coded here, red and green. So you have a 5-turn spiral here, because they couldn't fit all of the information in one turn, so they made a 5-turn spiral. And here you have a 4-turn spiral for the eclipses. Okay. This is again the gear diagram, and I would like to follow an example. I will take the Metonic again and show you how it works. So this is the input here, and I'm highlighting just the red gears. So you go here, this way, down, follow that until you reach this pointer here. And the calculation, if you do the maths, is 5 divided by 19 at the end. And okay, so this is the Metonic cycle equation, let's call it equation. So where are these numbers now? The 19 years are coded into this year. This has 38 teeth. If you divide 38 by 2, this is 19. So you have the 19 years there. The 235 lunar months are actually not in terms of a year, but in terms of this spiral, and they've divided it into 235 boxes, and every box is a month. And the 254 sidereal months are coded into this year. This is 127 teeth times 2 gives you 254. And for the Metonic cycle, this is exactly what you want, 5 by 19. You have a 5-turn spiral, and you have 19 years. So this is the correct calculation for that. Let's take another example. Let's look at the Saros cycle. It's a little bit more complex. This is the input again. It's always, you start here, you go down like that, you follow here, these large gears, and you go here out to the Saros. So you have 223 months. This is a year, straightforward. You need 223 teeth, because that's a prime number. And then if you do the maths, you get this result out. And that's again exactly what you want for the Saros cycle. You have a 4-turn spiral with 223 months. How does that look like in practice? So you have the two pointers. This is the Meton, and this is the Saros. This is the pointer. It has a little tip here, and the other side has a groove, which is slightly inside the material, and then this tip actually follows it, like you have in an old vinyl LP disc. So that was actually done like that. It's a very nice design, and from the original mechanism. Obviously they used metal, not plexiglass. So again, let's now go to the moon. So I'm not showing the rest of the dials because they have the same principles, but the moon is very interesting. So this is, I will zoom into this. Let's follow that. It's a little bit more complex. So you go down like that. You follow that. It goes through these gears, goes down. You have these 4 gears, and then it goes straight up. If you notice, these 2 axes are coaxial. You have this gray axle, and you have this pink one. And one rotates inside of the other with different speeds. And then you go up here, you have another coaxial situation, and you exit here at the moon position. And I would like to discuss about two areas of that. One is here, and the other one is up there. So let's start with this one. You see there are 4 gears, they all have 50 teeth. So if you follow the rules, you get 50 divided by 50 times 50 divided by 50 gives you 1. So this gives us a big question mark. Why would they do that? Although the rest of the mechanism is such an economic design, why would somebody want to have this there? So this is some computer graphics of these 4 gears with the 50 teeth. And if you look carefully, you will see here there is a slit on the upper gear. And there is a little pin here from the gear below. So you have the slot and you have the pin. And also you see that this axis here, this is the green axis for the top gear. But if you look on the bottom gear, you will see the axis is shifted. And the separation here is 1.1 millimeters, what they did at the time. And the way they do this is by a single piece. It's an axle that looks like that. Okay, so what is the significance of that? As it rotates around, you get something like a point going eccentric like that, like on a locomotive. And now let's look why they did that in particular for the Antikythera mechanism. So I've made some very simple sketches to show that. So first of all, here we have a circular motion, a very simple one. You have a point going around the circle, and I've also put the arrow just to make it more clear. So this is just a simple circular motion, and we will be increasing the complexity. So now let's talk about the epicyclic theory, which was developed by Hipparchus and even before that by Apollonius. You take a little, this little green circle and you place it on top of the blue one, and now let's take a look at what this black point does as you turn around. And we are tracing out this point. So you end up with another shape, which is close to a circle, and it's basically shifted with respect to the original blue one. So you will tell me, so what? You've just generated another circle. So now let's look at the same thing, but with the arrows now. So the one arrow is following the center of the circle, and the other arrow follows the black point. And we see now that the red arrow is lagging, it's behind the blue one. But as you look at this, now it will start to go faster, and it will accelerate and will get over the other one. So it creates a variable angular velocity, like a sinusoidal wave. Although the velocity of the blue one is constant over the course, but the red one makes this. And this is precisely what you want to have when you want to model an ellipse. So what is not straightforward, in my opinion, is how to get this idea into gears and make something out of it. So to model this with truly circular gears. But someone somewhere obviously found a way of applying this theory, and we find it on the Antikythera mechanism. And here I make the example. We have the slot here, which is from the gear on the top, and we have the pin, which is this black thing here, from the gear at the bottom. And I will run this again, and you just have to look at the black point moving inside the slit. So now it's moving to the outer side of the slit, and then it will start moving inwards again. So it's sliding in and out. And that simulates the elliptical trajectory of the moon, and it's actually a very good approximation to Kepler's second law. So I find this quite amazing that somebody thought about it and wanted to do it so accurately even such a long time ago. And not only that, but it also has the elements of a modern computer software, because this whole thing was fed already with a calculation. In this case, it was 254 divided by 19, and you feed it into this program, and you get an output which is an operation on that, which makes it vary with time. So you have the variable sidereal one coming out. You give the average one, and you get the variable out. to make it even more crazy, this whole thing then was mounted onto this large gear, and this large gear was also rotating itself. So you have a circle on top of a circle and a gear on top of a gear, and this makes, this is the so-called epicyclic gearing, as we call it now. It's got a very complex motion. And what they tried to model is this line of apsides that I showed before, this ellipse, as I said, rotates at a slow rate of 8.8 years. So after 8.8 years, this will rotate around and around and around the whole ellipse until it reaches back its other position, and this is modeled here also. Let's look at this in practice. So you have, this is a video from my model. You have the pin, you can see it moving in and out. Here is computer graphics, and you can see the complex motion. You see the pin moving left and right, it is rotating around, and the whole thing going around. And you will see this now all together as the whole gear also rotates. And, fast forward, and this is back again to the real device. So that's certainly one of the highlights of the Antikythera mechanism. So it's this part here I showed you. And the final thing I want to discuss is this part here, which is related to the moon position and the moon phase. I'm zooming in. So basically, they made the calculation for the moon position. However, the phase of the moon is not the same calculation, because they have the moon phase is not in sync with the moon trajectory, because the lunar month is not equal to the sidereal month in this other list of tables I had before. However, they noticed that if you take 254 minus 19, that gives you 235. And if we remember about the metonic cycle, which is basically a 19-year period, which we talked about, and every 19 years the moon will be again at the same star and at the same phase. That's what it tells you, the metonic cycle. So this is all calculated, this 19 years. So basically the sidereal month is calculated here, this 254 is calculated, it's this gray axle here. And the year is also calculated, it's the outer axle, it's this brown one. So you have these two concentric axes which are calculated, and they're already there and running. So they decided, okay, let's try to subtract them, which is what we call now differential gearing. So if you subtract them, you get 235, and this is exactly the duration you want for the lunar month, which is the moon phase. So the way they subtracted is they put these 4 gears here, and they kind of join the two axes together, and with a sense that they rotate, they are actually subtracted. So that's really the differential gears 2 millennia back. And on top of that, this thing moves epicyclically, so this moves again on another circle. And also these two ones, they are catching to each other with perpendicular angles, so also mechanically it's also quite hard to do. So it's all there. So in practice, you have the rotation here, which is just the trajectory of the moon on the zodiac. Then you also have the moon phase here. Basically, it's a double-colored sphere, which is half black and half white. And as it rotates around, you get the phase of the moon from the full moon to black, back again to the full moon. And if you remove the cap, you see this little epicyclic gear, which is crown-shaped, which catches with another one below, and this gives the rotation to the moon. And we can also see the two concentric axes. So this is the inner one, the gray, and you have the pink one, the outer one, the purple, sorry. And this is all put together like that. Again, this is the motion. Okay. So basically, I see two main ideas on the Antikythera mechanism. Two key ideas. One is you have integer numbers, and they're commensurate, and this goes along with Diophantus and Pythagoras, the theories. And the other key ingredient I see are circular motions. You have the planets, harmony in the universe, and you have the epicyclic motion theory of Hipparchus and Apollonius. And these are all brought together by using astronomical cycles into this Aristotelian kind of universe. So it really makes sense to me that this was a Greek thing devised at the time when these ideas were around. So it really fits well with the time and the place. So yes, I would like to conclude now. I think we are very lucky to find such a thing at the bottom of the sea 2,000 years later and be able to study that. It's a unique thing. We'd love to have more of them, but obviously bronze was very valuable and they were melting it. So if something was not working again, or for the statues, they were remelting them and making new things. And that survived because it was out of access to the bottom of the sea. So that's why we still have it. And I think it's not just an ingenious construction, but it's an essence of know-how, of the astronomical knowledge, and it's also an essence of technology, mathematics and physics, and the whole Greek worldview at its apogee. I hope I've shown that it's maybe relatively easy to understand the Antikythera mechanism, or some of it. However, what is still hard even for me, is to believe its existence. So I really think it's something out of place and time. And I would like to thank you for your attention.
So would you like to ask?
Are there any questions? Yes.
Or
I'm happy to give.
This thing has been made. Certainly there has been development. So have one found the earlier models where they tried the different theories, or is this the only one you have found?
This is the only one we have found, but I'm 100% sure that there were others before that. Everybody's convinced about that. This is like the fifth iPad generation. It cannot be the first one. So there are some things written in scripts and texts, but nothing has survived mechanical. So it could be traced back to Archimedes, because he obviously had some, it's called the sphere of Archimedes, which was a planetarium, which the Romans took because it was in some palace, and I think they wrote about it. And that's much after Archimedes died. They couldn't understand it, but they were very, very happy to have that and to see that. They didn't describe it fully. And also Greeks, we are not the best to document stuff, so many stuff was not documented. So I spoke to some historians of science, and apparently Greeks were documenting only if they had a special school, a special university to teach something. Otherwise, it was more like an everyday thing, and they wouldn't really document everything.
Thank you.